Our kickoff speaker is Francis Lee. And Francis is a return visitor to the workshop. And the reason he's returning is because he made such a big and positive impression on all of the attendees in last year's workshop. And even though he's quite far away in Hong Kong, it's late there, he's agreed to be part of this. And of course, we're using this technology, Zoom, to bring him here. Zoom, of course, is a company that was founded by a Chinese-American immigrant, a fellow who came from China and launched this now multi-billion-dollar company. This is an example of technology serving humanity. We wouldn't be able to do this. We would not be able to bring this to you were it not for technologies like this. All of us are scattered across the continent, some of us across the ocean, to participate. And this is truly remarkable. Francis is just the person we need to kick this off. He has had a long career in the semiconductor business and in human interfaces, allowing us to make computers do different kinds of things. He's a board member at Adesto Tech, which is involved with semiconductors, chips, helping to power the Internet of Things. But he's best known, perhaps, as the CEO, board chairman, longtime senior executive at Synaptics, which is a semiconductor firm, but worked to develop all sorts of interfaces that we now use: touch, display, biometrics. Many of you used 1, 2, or 3 of these things just to log in today. He's been involved with these things for a very, very long time. And he's a terrific speaker. You're going to get a lot out of it. Feel free to use that Q&A button to raise questions. And throughout this, think about, do my students need to know this? How can I make it come alive for them? Friends, it's time for Francis. Wherever you are, put your hands together because he deserves a warm welcome.
Okay, thank you, Clay, for the very kind introduction. Just like Clay said, I'm actually currently in Hong Kong, so it's actually greetings from Hong Kong. And please feel free to stop me or send in questions and comments during my talk here. At the end of my talk, there will be a time for Q&A. And I think Asia Society is also going to send out my presentation slides. So there is really no need to copy any of the stuff that I showed. So again, like Clay said, this is really for you, and hopefully this is going to stimulate some discussions. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And the topic of my discussion with you is just like what Margaret said, the topic of the next 2 days, technology and humanities. So there's going to be 2 main topics that I'll be covering. First is, who is winning the technology race? We are a highly competitive society and countries. So there's a lot of talk between USA and China right now. So wonder who is winning the race there? And secondly, what does all this technology mean for humanity? Just like Clay said, what does it do, okay? So hopefully I'm going to speak a little bit about that as well to stimulate some of your thoughts on this particular topic. But before I dive into this, discussion about who is winning the race between USA and China, it's good to kind of do a little bit of a flashback. About 35, 40 years ago, not that long ago, there's actually, believe it or not, a trade war between USA and Japan. Now, 60s and 70s are the very new and successful years in semiconductor development and manufacturing in the Silicon Valley. As a matter of fact, we call this the Silicon Valley because silicon is really the base material that semiconductor is being built on. So Japan, however, emerged as a major producer of semiconductors in the late 1970s, coming out of nowhere, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later. They took spectacular market shares in a product called dynamic RAM. which is a dynamic random access memory, which is widely used in computers. The US share of the market dropped to 20% from 70%, while the Japanese share has jumped from 30% to 70% in 8 short years. Just to illustrate, the change, the top semi producer in the world was TI in 1970. And then in 1985, it became NEC, which is Nippon Electronics. So what has happened here? Well, the 80s is the decade of the personal computers, also widely called the third industrial revolutions. It turns out personal computers, there are 3 main differentiation at that time. One is obviously the microprocessor. Secondly is the operating system offered by companies like Microsoft. And the third is memories, because the PC actually uses a lot of memories. Now in 1984, US had a dominant market share of DRAMs in everywhere else except Japan. So there's a lot of discussion about market access in Japan was limited because of government policies, and Japan was dumping memory products in the United States below cost. So there was an anti-dumping case in December of 1985, which resulted in President Reagan impose 100% tariff on $300 million of Japanese products in April of 1987. I think all of this sound familiar when you talk about, tariffs and trade, war and all that stuff. So you might ask, what's the result? Well, it's not too good for United States or Japan, even though short term actually boosted the sales of the 1 megabit DRAM in both Japan, and US. As a result of that, there is a temporary rise in terms of revenues due to DRAM in Japan as well as in United States. And TI, 60% of the profit were due to the DRAM during that years. However, because of the high DRAM prices and profits, it also encouraged and accelerated Korea firms to enter in the memory market. As a matter of fact, during the 80s, every time when I visited Korea, I came away so impressed. I mean, people were still working in the semiconductor factory till late at night. I mean, at 10 o'clock at night, the offices are still widely lit. And when you go into the fab, the places where you manufacture the semiconductors, they have one of a kind of semiconductor equipment everywhere. And they will ask you questions about why this, why that, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of how Korea jumped into the semiconductor memory market. Just to illustrate another point here, when you look at the top 10 semiconductor manufacturers between 81, 89, and 2019, you can see how the US had gone from 5 to 3 to 6. But it's worth noting, okay, in 2019, which is last year, who are the 6 companies? Okay, these companies are Intel, which is the king of microprocessor, Micron, they're still doing memory, but the next 4 companies has nothing to do with memory. Broadcom, Qualcomm, TI, and NVIDIA. This company excel in communication, networking, and computing chips. And when you look at Japan, it's gone from 4 to 6 to only 1. As a matter of fact, the company that I talked to you about, NEC, is no longer even in the semiconductor business anymore. They have divested all of their semiconductor assets. In Korea, gone from nothing to 2 of the top 10 last year. And in China has 1, and that is basically TSMC, the largest foundries in the world. So when you look at that, I lived right through that because I was in the semiconductor industry at that time. So you ask, what are the lessons learned? First is leadership today does not guarantee leadership tomorrow. When you look at, I guess there's a Chinese proverb in learning, right? Learning is like rolling up streams. If you don't make progresses, you go backwards. And especially in technology, because it's such a fast, vast area and fast moving area, government policy may help you to jumpstart an industry, like in the case of Japan, there was a lot of the discussion about MITI, which is the Ministry of Information and Industry, tried to jumpstart the semiconductor technology, but it didn't last because you have to continue to innovate or you will be left behind. So while the US have ceded the DRAM market to Japan, to Korea, USA excelled in computing, networking, and communication sectors. So the best way to describe it is really the race between the turtle and the hares. You just cannot sleep, you really have to be on your toes to compete in this market. So I'm going to offer you an example of how US and China has competed fiercely in one particular segment, which is supercomputers. Now, supercomputer and the up and coming, which is called quantum computing, which you're going to hear a lot, as time moves on. Supercomputers is important because they're very critical in terms of research and discovery, because they can crunch a large amount of data in a very short time. And this is very important for modeling as well as for simulations. The race between the two countries is to bring the first exascale supercomputer. An exascale supercomputer is able to do one exaflop calculations. So what is an exaflop calculation? It's a billion to billion calculations per second. It's a very large number. To put it in some kind of a sense that we can understand, so an exaflop takes 4 years of calculation by every human on Earth, every second of the time. That's what an exaflop is. But the computer can do it in the blink of an eye. So both countries have announced that 3 of the systems under development, but the US is ahead in terms of deployment in 2021. Remember, I told you the two countries has been competing in this area for years. As of November last year, on the world's top 500 fastest computers, 228 of them reside in China, which is 45%, and 23% of them is in the United States. However, quantity is not necessarily the measurements. USA actually has an edge in terms of resources. A petaflop is basically thousands of exaflops. So if you count the fact that the US is going to become earlier with these exascale systems and they have more resources in performance, I would say the US is winning the supercomputer race. However, I would tell you for now, because China is rapidly catching up. So what's happening to China in terms of technology transformation? What have they done in terms of coming from nowhere to become a technology powerhouse? It has a lot to do with this gentleman, Mr. Deng Xiaoping. I don't know how many of you have heard about him, okay? This guy is a remarkable and very pragmatic leader. He was actually purged in the Mao era by a number of times, and he came back into power in the 70s. So one of the first things he did was he opened up 4 special economic zones to attract foreign investments, boost exports. Not only did he do that to stimulate economic activities, he also commissioned what is called the 863 program. And this is the government-sanctioned program to stimulate the development of advanced technology in a wide range of areas. And he didn't just commission a program. He actually put some wood behind the arrows by funding it with 5% of the total government spending in that years. So the economic activity was flourishing. He is stimulating the country with a lot of money to develop technologies. And obviously, it's a huge market. And the lack of legacy system, I cannot even, minimize that. By that I mean, because they don't have, the latest, the things that hold them back, they actually can jump to the latest technologies. So the technology, was why happening fast and why. So I'll give you an example, okay? Landlines, which we all take it for granted in the United States. The toughest part to connect a landline is actually the, let's say, last mile, or maybe the last 100 yards, or or half a mile, because to connect it from the street to your home is actually very difficult. So the easiest way to kind of become, de facto, the communication tool is the mobile phone. Once it happens. So by the end of 2012, which is some years ago, 89% of the population are using a cell phone. And 2/3 of the cell phone, 2/3 of the user own a smartphone. Now, 8 of the 10 smartphones being used in China are from Chinese cell phone manufacturers. Not only that, you may not know about it, but 3 of the top 5 cell phone manufacturers worldwide are from China. Now, the other 2 is Apple and Samsung. But the other 3 is all Chinese brands, even though you don't see them, in China. Now, once you have a cell phone, now it's easy to connect to the internet. So almost, 99% of the internet user access the net through mobile devices. And especially the young one, 10 to 39 years old, represent almost 70% of all the internet users. Now, keep in mind, I'm kind of adding one thing with another one. So now you have the cell phone, you can access the net. The next thing is, because of the lack of the credit card, so the mobile payment become very easy because the phone is connected to a bank account, okay? So there's no reason why you have to use cash, right? So when you look at it by 2021, it's forecasted almost 80% of the smartphone users in China will be using mobile payment as compared to 23% in USA and 15% in Germany. Now, why is this statistic important? Because once you can start doing mobile payments, now doing e-commerce is just a snap of a finger, literally. Because the merchants can actually put a QR code in front that basically is a unique name, an electronic name for their stores, and it's free, right? Literally, the QR code is free. So now the e-commerce is everywhere. So it's about 20% of the consumer spending versus 11% in the US consumers. And I believe that is going to continue to excel. As a matter of fact, one of the tour guy that when I was in China last year, he actually told me that he has never touched money for 2 years already. Everything is done electronically. Okay, another very interesting thing here, all that stuff here, I don't know how many of you had heard about this, the Singles Day in China. So China has got a tremendous demographic problem. There's got a lot of more male than females. It's forecast that 25% of the male will stay single, by the way. So females are hot commodities in China. So Nanjing University actually started this, what they call Bear Stick Day, okay? And it's November 11th. So November is 1111. So it represents 4 bear sticks, okay? Now, Alibaba is very smart. It took that, event and turned it into a gift day. There's a day to buy gifts, okay? And that single day sales in China surpassed everything else that we know of, Cyber Monday, Black Friday, and so on and so forth. In one day last year, Alibaba recorded more than $38 billion in sales. JD.com recorded $29 billion in sales. So in the world, Amazon is the #1 online store, followed by Alibaba and JD.com. So you can see the impact of all this technology, what happens here. I'll give you another example. My wife and I were visiting with another couple to a place called Tiger Hills, which is a very famous historical place in China. My friend's wife, Marianne, wanted to buy a scarf, but we, ran out of, we don't have the cash, nor do I have enough money in my WeChat account to pay for the scarf. So basically, I sent a message to my friend in Hong Kong. My friend sent through the WeChat account to my WeChat account the amount of money instantly, okay? They call it hongbao, which is like a red packet, but basically just wire me some money into my phone. And I pay for that with my cell phone. So what am I trying to tell you here is, for virtue of all this thing, there's a mobile ATM going around in China. Anytime when you need money, okay, you can actually ask your friend. You don't have to go to a bank to do that. And the net of all that is it really stimulates a lot of commercial activities. So the lack of the legacy system is really enabling China to win all these races today. So let's talk about something else that use technology besides, all this electronic stuff. How about infrastructures? Let's talk about the highways, the bridges, and the high-speed rails. Now, on January of 2005, China introduced the 71118 network, and basically what that is the 7 is 7 radio expressway from Beijing. 11 is 11 of the expressway going north and south, and 18 is east and west. So by the end of 2018, the total length of that network reached 95,000 miles. It's by far the world's largest expressway system by length. The Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, which is basically spanking new, it was opened late last year, is a 34-mile bridge tunnel system. And this is really a major engineering feat. It's all built by Chinese technologies. 7 of the world's longest bridges are in China. The longest one is the Kunshan Grand Bridge, which is 110 miles long, and it connects Shanghai with Nanjing. And the high-speed rail, when Deng Xiaoping visited Japan in 1978, he said, we gotta have that in China. So what has happened is by December of 2019, the high-speed rail reached 22,000 miles in total length, accounting for 2/3 of the world's high-speed rail tracks in commercial service. So when you look at all this stuff and you say, which country is winning the technology race? So I'm kind of giving you bits and pieces of some infrastructure, some of the e-commerce and so on and so forth. Now, let me bring you back to the lessons learned in the semiconductor race, okay? The turtle in the hare, you always have to keep on innovating. Technology is such a big space. When you say you dominate one sector, another sector comes up and you have to compete. But the more fundamental question is, do we really need a winner? Okay, even though we're very competitive. Well, why is that? Because when you say you have to have a winner, we suggest it's a zero-sum game. And I would say it's not a zero-sum game. Well, why is that? Because the economic pie, because of the technology progress, has kept on expanding. So a bigger piece of a smaller pie may not be as good as a smaller piece of a bigger pie. And when you look at the new markets that's being created, new challenges that keeps on coming, and then a bunch of unresolved problems, you said, well, it is really not a zero-sum game. So what does that really mean? Well, there are other people talks about decoupling as the way to fix USA and China issues. Let's just stop doing business with USA and China. So the Boston Consulting Group that's commissioned by SIA did a study, and they said, well, better watch out because more than 1/3 of the revenue come from sales with China. If you decouple with China, it does not guarantee that you don't hurt the domestic manufacturers. As a matter of fact, Huawei is now banned from doing 5G, right? In UK. And UK telecom manufacturers are saying, it's going to take me 5 years to unravel from all the Huawei equipments. Huawei said, well, you should be able to buy all the 5G equipments from Nokia and from Ericsson. Well, the Nokia factories is in China. So now what are you going to do, right? So it is not as simple as you think. It also accelerated China's push into the self-reliance. And, China still have to buy chips they cannot do. So guess where they're going to go? They're going to Korea in the short term and China in the long term. So when you think about that, okay, there's probably another way to go deal with this. Competition always good, promotes progress. But collaboration is really widely adopted, right? In a company, you talk about teamwork, we talk about partnership between companies, and competition and collaboration is not mutually exclusive. So why don't we call something called competition, where you compete and you collaborate at the same time to solve all this problem? Because if you do that, you will actually have doing a better thing for the humanity. Now, however, there's a caveat here. Competition requires talents. Numerous studies have shown that U.S. is actually behind in our grade schools in our math and sciences. That is actually not good. As a matter of fact, in the past 15 years, the American science and engineering bachelor degrees comprise only 10% of the global total. China is more than twice that. We have the best university in the world, but when you look at 2016, USA has less than 600,000 STEM graduates, and China has 4.7 million, 8 times more than United States. Again, like I said, we have the best universities in the world. Most of the enrollment in the science and technology classes are by foreign students. When you look at the bracket here, it's really scary here, because if those foreign students are not there anymore, I think most of this department will be in severe financial hardship. Also, there's another statistic. I don't know whether you know about it or not. In the Silicon Valley, 59% of the STEM employees are foreign born. I'm one of them before I retired. 1 out of 6 is from China. So if you start, decoupling and thinking about how you do it, you better think about, where the talent is going to come from. And I will also encourage the teachers in here to encourage the student to pay attention to STEM programs and get them interested in STEM degrees. Now let's pivot back to humanity here. So we talk a lot about China's progresses in technology. Let's look at what happened here. Deng Xiaoping started the economic liberation in 1978, okay? And because of that, he actually took 800 million people out of poverty, 70% of the world total, very impressive. However, almost 400 million of them are still living below the upper middle income poverty. So they come a long way, they still got a long way to go. Now let's look at wealth creation. Credit Suisse in 2019, there were 100 million Chinese people among the world's top 10% of the richest people. Technology, besides real estate, was the biggest driver of the new wealth. And Beijing surpassed New York City as the billion capital of the world, with greater than 100 billionaires there. Just think about it for a minute. So there's a lot of money there. And certainly China's middle class is the largest in the world. 119 million of them has wealth between 50,000 and $500,000. So certainly there's a lot of wealth. China can use it. So let's look at it through another lens, which is philanthropy. And in this case, China is not very good. In 2019, the Cherish AIDS Foundation, China is dead last on 126 countries in the World Giving Index. The giving as a percent of GDP is 0.1%, USA is 2%. In 2015, Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, said something that's kind of funny, but it's sad. He said giving donation to charities is much harder than earning money. Just think about it for a minute, okay? It's harder than earning money. Now, there is hope in the horizon that China has passed the first charity law in 2016, followed by another law in 2017. So, believe it or not, China actually doubled the giving to 0.2% of GDP, but still a very, still a long way to go. And the Chinese philanthropies focus their giving in a lot more operational driven philanthropy in education, poverty, social welfare, healthcare, and especially in disaster relief. So when you look at all that, what does that mean? The technology is actually trying very hard to help. WeChat is trying to use that immense social platform to match us mobile donations. Alipay, which is Alibaba, has got a very creative way of recording your low carbon footprint. When you reach a certain number, they will plant a tree for you. And Yidu Cloud and Sudo Cloud actually is using AI and machine learning to benefit the healthcare sectors. Now, given all those things going on, China is in urgent need of philanthropic infrastructure and management professionals. They need to establish an ecosystem in financial, governance, and legal system to facilitate our healthy philanthropic sectors. But more important than anything else, they need people. It's just like when they open up the economic zone, the most important people is managers. The managers really need to teach the workers, what the standard of excellence is, how to work, how to manage. And the same as philanthropies. China really needs people like a good friend of mine, Diane Yuan. She is actually on the board of 1990. She is a practitioner in philanthropy as well as a professor in teaching people how to do that. This is also an area of great opportunity for collaboration between the two countries. Now let's pivot back to USA. So, all of us does emails, and you have CC and BCC and all that stuff. I wonder if you know what that means. In the 19th century, the biggest invention is typewriter and carbon papers. About 40 years ago, if you run a credit card transaction, people will swipe your machine and then they will have a carbon copy of a transaction given to you. All of that changed when Xerox come about with copying. So 59 Xerox, and before that is called Haloy, invented this xerography from two Greek words, but basically it's a process about shining a light on the photo, conductive material, leaving an image when charge is discharged, and then code the image with toner. The process was, invented by Chester Carlson, and the first copy is still in the Smithsonian Museum. Xerox introduced the products Model A, and later on a more successful product in 1914. In 2004, there was 3 trillion Xerox copies made, about 500 for every human on Earth. But frankly, nowadays, there's probably zillions of them, surpassed it now. As a matter of fact, one of the favorite jokes among us when we Xerox things we don't want is we talk about how many trees are we killing because we, Xerox them needlessly. Now, but Xeroxing also transformed how knowledge and information flow in a cooperation. This is the part of the impact of humanity, more than just copying. Any person can become an author and publish your material to others. As a matter of fact, I used to take my son, as I was 7 years old, to my office, on Saturdays, where I catch up on work and make sure he does his homework. And when he finished homework, he would just wander around the office. One day he decided to draw a graph. And a graph is when the more the CEO goes to a golf course, the higher is the share price of the company. After he made the graph, he made a Xerox copy on everybody's desk. So when I come to work Monday, I really have an embarrassing story to tell because he became an author and a publisher at the same time. So copy laws were challenged, documents were easier to leak, secrets harder to keep, and you can tell that the copying was just addicting. And Carlson began to earn royalties, and he retired in Rochester. He earned about $200 million from his inventions, but he described his financial success as satisfying, but he's most satisfying in developing a working machine to solve everyday problems. He died of heart attack in '62, happy, watching a play, but he lived a modest life, and he gave away almost all his money, all his donations anonymous, and his charity continues today through the foundation that he left behind. At the time of his death, the UN secretary said something that's really, really fantastic. I just read a couple of things that I underline here. I respect him more as a man of exceptional moral stature and as humanist. He belonged to the rare breed of leaders who generate in our faith, in our hearts, faith in man and hope for the future. Now, this is the kind of technologies that we want in our world. Modern day technology that turned philanthropist is Bill Gates. He pretty much donated all his money into his foundations and enticed Warren Buffett to donate quite a bit of it into his foundation. But the interesting thing about his foundation is it's a sunset foundation, meaning within 50 years after both he and his wife died, the foundation will cease to exist. So instead of having a foundation living in perpetuity, he wants a maximum impact during his lifetime by putting a maximum number of dollars. So I'm sure we are going to learn more about Bill Gates as we move on. So let me talk about the rapid pace of technology innovation right now. And the best way to talk about that is the converging of communication and commuting. If you want to make a long distance call one time, you have to go to a telecom office, you pay a ransom, you talk for a few minutes, and you send mails, through the post office, which now we call snail mail. And then there's a telex machine, which when I was working, you can send a memo to oversee, and you get a response in 24 hours. All of that change with a computer and email and fax. But that is not good enough, because that's still a fix. Now we have a mobile communication and computing platform. And if that's not good enough, we have a tablet. And if that's not good enough, we have a smartphone. The smartphone is the one equipment that I would hate to lose, because if I lose that, I'm in a heap of trouble with all the data and information I have. Not only that, there's billions of people walk around with the world's knowledge in their pockets. So I'm just going to show you a bunch of stuff here, not because I want to talk about each of them, but because the confluence makes each of them more powerful. As an example, I had a problem in my bathroom faucet. Rather than call a plumber, my wife and I fixed the leak of faucet by following the YouTube step by step. Just think about it for a minute. I mean, I may have 2 left hands and 10 thumbs. I'm able to do that because YouTube is teaching me how to do all that stuff. So the technology evolution speeds up exponentially. Each generation improves over the last, and it's getting faster and faster. AI is going to make the machine do things that are a lot more human-like, just like driving, right? The concurrent, advances is what is making all this thing faster and faster. New business models, like share economy, Uber and Lyft are worth billions of dollars. They don't own any cars. Airbnb owns no hotels or motels. Automated vehicle is going to threatening 2 to 3 million jobs. Boston Consulting Group estimated 25% of the tasks by 2025 is going to be automated. So there's no reversing in technological progress. So the question is technology going to manage humanity, or humanity going to manage technology? Let me offer you a few scenarios. Do you want privacy, or do you want security? Just think about COVID-19 tracking. That's right in the middle of the debate. Do you want a self-driving car, or do you want a car with a bomb? Do you want a 3D printing machine to print organs, or do you want a 3D machine printing plastic guns that evades, surveillance? Social media, xenophobia, is it real or is it fake? As a matter of fact, the recent COVID-19 is also labeled the world's first social media pandemics. So innovation may be moving at the light speed, but our user protections do not. So the model of this plastic gun was printed 100,000 times before a federal judge blocked the posting of the 3D guns. This company, defense distributor, is still fighting in court to offer their file for $50. CRISPR technology, gene splicing, make a twin, immune from AIDS, but who knows what other things they will produce. Stem cell research, different laws in different countries. So strict compliance with the law may be crucial, but it's insufficient to avoid the ethical pitfalls. So let's think about, how do we have humanity manage technology? So let me offer a few examples here, because I firmly believe schools and homes are the best way, are the biggest influence in our life, and are also the best way to teach our kids how to handle all those rapid dislocations. So this school is about 3.5 hours from Bangkok, as full of symbolisms. The picture on the top left, resembles a buffalo. The picture below that resembles a dragon. So a buffalo is ignorance in Thailand, and a dragon is knowledge. So it means when you go in, you're ignorant, you learn something, and when you go out, you don't, you go from learn something to nothing. So basically it symbolizes continuous learning. Now, what makes this bamboo school unique here is a community center. Schools open on Saturdays and Sundays, and they close 2 days midweek. Community service is mandatory for all the students. Project-based learning to encourage students to learn, to advocate and to collaborate is every semester. And students are empowered to design school uniforms, evaluate teachers, and they are also tasked to select the incoming students. It is a public school. There's a lot of people wanting to go there. And so they're basically empowering and teaching the kids, responsibilities. So they focus to develop the citizens in addition to scholars and knowledge in the school. Another example of what he does is what's called a village library. Toys and books are donated by either individuals, or corporations, and is, managed by basically a bunch of kids, okay? This girl in the middle and his 4 other cohorts are basically managing this library. If you want to borrow a book or a toy, you have to do community service. The more community service you do, the better the toys, the better the books. And there's even an ice cream stand there. They buy ice cream is about 30 cents and they make about 3 cents. So when you start doing that, they really teach the kids responsibility, honesty, caring. It really is something that it very, very unique to see. Now, I am sure the Bamboo School and the Village Library are there in the United States, okay? Maybe even better. We just have to make sure they get supported, share the best practices, and roll them out as fast as possible. President Obama said something in his farewell address. The next wave of the economic dislocation won't come from overseas. It will come from relentless pace of automation that make a lot of good middle-class jobs obsolete. So how do you deal with that? Well, the only way to deal with that is education and policy. There's no other ways to deal with this rapid pace of change. The old ad slogan, right? If you don't keep moving, you will expire. Schools and universities should provide the coming generation with the skills they need in the emerging economy. It is really a life continuous learning that you have to do that. However, according to the White House report, US spends around 0.1% of the GDP on programs designed to help people with changes in the workplace. US is behind France, Germany, Korea, Canada, and Japan. We have to fix that because if we don't continuously to train our workforce, we will be sorry. So how else to deal with that, besides this dislocation and job market, we really have got to be seriously thinking about how to deal with the ethics in terms of the technology innovations. Personal value and moral compass are very, very important. Unfortunately, you don't measure those like in SATs or any of the tests, but those things are the inherent human values that will help us to manage this fast pace of the technology innovation. Personal values such as respect, honesty, caring, are very, very important elements in terms of how they make the society better. Moral compasses has got to go beyond, I am okay by the law, okay? It must appeal to a higher sense of the good. So with that, let me just give you my closing remark here. We're undergoing the 4th industrial revolution. It's also the digital revolutions. Now, like I said, every industrial revolution has enormously positive impacts on wages, productivity, wealth generation, mobility, and the standard of living, right? And this 4th industrial revolution, what makes it unique is a confluence of the technology, and it blurs the boundaries between the physical, digital, and the biological worlds. I mean, the innovation in the next 10 years is going to be more than innovation in the last 100 years. The pace of change in the circuit will be fast and will be furious. So getting ready for this 4th industrial revolution, which is undergoing now, will require first, talents. I mean, this is my call to the teachers. Please encourage your students to be interested in STEM studies. We cannot compete and collaborate unless we have manpower. I mean, we have the best university in the world. We just need them to get in there, and get interested. And by the way, the jobs that are available is going to be mostly STEM related. In other words, when you look at the Amazon fulfillment center, people that are designing the robots, running the robots have the jobs because they're displacing the people that are moving boxes, put them on the shelves. So not only is it important to compete, it's also important for their livelihood. Continuous learning, and I'm going to put in stuff like soft skills, like critical thinking, emotional intelligence, things that, not the hot, topics like math and science and English and all this and that. It's going to be important for the individuals to succeed. And then the leaders and the citizens have to have the moral compass by putting people first. We have to remind ourselves all the time, all these innovations are made by the people for the people. So to make sure that, we don't have people printing plastic guns, and posting them online, okay, for, minuscule profit, and the net result of that is really going to be a tremendous problem for the organizations, for the world. So anyway, that finished my remarks. And frankly, I would love to hear your comments and questions. And this is my email. You're welcome to send me messages, and we'd love to talk to you for future comments and questions and ideas. Okay, Clay, let me turn it back to you.
Well, that was your usual fantastic presentation. Thank you so much, Francis. You really gave us a lot. You packed a lot in. I have some questions. We have questions that have been coming in from the audience, and many of them are just outstanding. So we want to get to as many as possible. I want to come back to your question about ethics and humanism and those sorts of things, but let's start with the question of innovation. You have been an innovator. You've been involved with innovative companies. You've nurtured innovation. What is innovation, and how does one make it happen?
So first of all, innovation is not something that is magical, requires high IQ and all that stuff. Okay, so let me give you one of the best innovation in the travel. Okay, I mean, it's not uncommon that I fly over 100,000 miles, every year. Okay, so in the early years, what do people do? They carry a garment bag, they carry the briefcases. To me, the best innovation in the airline industry, travel industry, is luggage on wheels. Now, what could be simpler than a luggage you put the wheels on it, right? Can you imagine now if you go to traveling without a set of luggage that are on wheels? It looks silly, right? So first of all, innovation is solving a day-to-day problem and does not need an Einstein, way of fixing a light bulb and all this and that, right? But innovation also have to have the right environment. People has got to be able to say, okay, I'm not afraid to fail. If I want to fail, I want to fail fast, and I want to fail early. And this is the spirit of the Silicon Valley, right? You have tons of startups. Not every one of them make it, okay? But even if you don't make it, you learn something from it, right? And then you move on to the next, inventions, right? So it is really common sense. You see a problem, you want to find a way to solve it, okay? You don't want to be afraid to fail. You want to make sure that if it doesn't work, you try it again and again. So if you have that spirit, right, you have the right environment. Yeah, of course, you got to have some basic skills, okay, But nowadays, with internet, with all this stuff, like I said, people walk around with the world's knowledge in your pockets. It's called a smartphone, right?
No, it's truly amazing the sort of access that we have. But I love your example. Putting things in a pouch, people have done that for a very long time. Creating a wheel to help move things around, people did that for a long time. But finally, somebody puts these things together. And so, as you say, it wasn't a giant scientific breakthrough. It was addressing a need, a perceived need, and then focusing on that. Now, you talked about failure and embracing failure, the notion of not being afraid to make mistakes, not being afraid to not be successful. what do you have to do, though, to nurture that kind of attitude, to nurture that kind of fearlessness?
Okay, so I'll give an example. When I was running Synaptics, you know, every now and then we will have this called Rubber Chicken Day. So what does Rubber Chicken Day do? Everybody can go and talk about an idea that they have, okay? And it's got some very simple things. You don't even, it's a concept basically. So, well, no, if I can do that, this and that and that, right? But of course, we would like them to use Synaptic technology to do that. The winner of that is by the audience applauding. It gets a rubber chicken. The loser gets a rubber duck. And the people display them prominently, okay, in the cubicles, right? Okay. And then there's a committee that looks at all the winners of the rubber chickens, and it's called Rubber Chicken Committee. And then you start take those ideas, and you see any one of them can be commercialized. And we actually have done some product coming out of that. So you have to make it fun, Clay, right? You know, so there's no loser here. Loser, and people also show prominently the rubber duck. It means they participated in it. And this is the kind of one in by, you really have got to have the right environment to stimulate the kind of innovations, right? It's not winning or losing, okay? It's really participating, throw something out to see which one of it sticks.
Yeah, so rewarding both the ducks and the chickens in this, and creating an environment where people are ready to experiment. Now, this plays into another big point that you made about the competition not being zero sum. The competition within the company wasn't zero sum, and you've suggested that the competition between the United States, China, and all the other players in the tech world is not zero sum. Can you expand on that just a little bit? Why isn't it zero sum? If I lose market share, if my product doesn't dominate, aren't I a loser?
Just think about the current COVID-19 problem today. Just think about that for a minute, right? If you're competing, you would say, I have this vaccine. I'm going to sell it at a high price, right? You don't have it, I'm not going to give it to you, right? Or maybe I have a patent on it, right? Okay, you need it, so you got to have it. But it's a pandemic, it's a world's problem. So it doesn't matter who comes up first with it. It doesn't matter whether I'm going to keep my, DNA, of this virus secret here, so that, I mean, it doesn't do any good if you start doing that, right? Okay. So this is a problem here that really calls for collaborations, because it's really for the common good. Now, of course, there are competition here in terms of market shares, right? For a certain product, I fight furiously for it. But then there's new market that are coming up. So maybe if 1 + 1, my technology, including your technology, can invent something new. So where is the competition coming from? By the way, this is called collaboration, right? Partnership between companies, right? Now, an ultimate form of partnership, Clay, is when one company buys another company. Mm-hmm. Right? Say, okay, forget it. I don't want any of the legal jargon in terms of whose IP it is, all this and that. I want to make the same company, so I'll buy you now. But think about it. That actually is a collaboration, right? But it's a collaboration in a commercial sense doing that, right? So, I mean, there are so many examples. I kind of throw one out that is nothing to do with commercial, like philanthropy. No, why can't U.S., who is an expert in philanthropy, help the people in China, which is a tremendous wealth creation over there, okay, for the benefit of mankind in China, right? So yeah, there are competition in terms of market share that you have to, be careful about all that stuff. And there's all kinds of collaboration opportunity that goes on, right? And frankly, when you do collaboration like that, one of the things that matters here, you make the employee feel better, because they're contributing to humanity, right? Rather than just talking about the last tens of the percent of the market share or the last cents of the products, right? So, one of the things that actually, to me, is important in any company is the corporate social responsibilities. Okay, so when you do that, you are actually helping humanity through, your company's resources, and they also get a sense of belonging in your employee in terms of how you help the communities.
Now, that's a great point. Also, a sense of belonging, a sense of mission, that the mission is broader than market share or profit, those sorts of things, although those are strong motivators, right, to try and develop the best products and things like that. Now, one of the questions that's come up in the Q&A section, and is a natural one, you've quite clearly shown that competition is a good thing, that having choice, being able to choose a system that may be more responsive to you, all of those things, competition is a good thing. But in the trade war that hasn't quite ended, which is in many ways a tech war, the American side is arguing, hey, this is not fair competition. Can you say something more about a level playing field? You've done battle on that for a long time.
This is exactly what happened in Japan, right? I mean, I was in the US side, I was complaining, just like the rest of the companies, this is not a fair game, right? Japan was putting up government policies and all this and that, right? So without talking about specifics between US and China, by the way, let me just say that US is just as guilty, although you don't kind of talk about a lot of that, okay? Because you always talk about the other side that's got all this problem, okay? So, you obviously have those kind of issues, right? When governments, especially want to, encourage certain technologies and stuff like it happens. So working with them, competing with them, you have to deal with it. You cannot just say, run away from it. I mean, it's no difference, right? Than two companies compete with each other. One company might know the end customer's relationship better than you. So, well, maybe unfair because he's got some relationship there. Do you just say, hey, this is unfair competition, I cannot deal with it, right? So you have to produce a better products, right? You have to produce something that your competitors cannot do, right? So in today, there's a lot of in the media about stealing IP and all this and that. All I want to say is remember what Dan said in the opening, okay? Don't just believe everything you hear, okay? And I'm not saying they're all wrong, okay? And I'm also saying that be aware of that, what you hear here. As a matter of fact, in one of Asia Society's event that I attended, there was a very prominent, successful lawyer, Margaret probably remember his name, I just forgot here, okay? He basically said right now that IP, which US talk about all the time, there is more people suing China that are Chinese on IP infringements in China than in US, right? So yeah, they might have been so-called stealing intellectual property in the past, okay? As they build up the IP portfolio, they actually worry more about people stealing their IP, right? So you just have to learn how to deal with it, Clay. I'm not suggesting that it's not there. I'm not suggesting it's fair, okay? But that's the card you dealt with. You have to deal with it. By running away from it, by decoupling with it, does not solve the problem.
Okay, so decoupling, as you emphasized, drawing on the Boston Consulting Group's work, you showed the potential costs of decoupling. Francis, if I could shift a little bit, we've got quite a few questions. One comes from Ingrid, and she is saying, okay, how do we encourage a humanistic approach? How do we do that? You mentioned corporate social responsibility. She's asking from the side of being a teacher, how do we nurture that? At the same time, you're trying to push the students into math and science. How do we get them thinking about the ethics of the application of these things?
So first of all, the simplest way is to do any of that. You need examples, you need good leaders, right? And I don't necessarily mean political leaders, right? I mean, you need examples and leaders at home, in parents. You need examples in schools, right? In terms of how you conduct your day-to-day business. What is, acceptable and what is ethical and what is, wrong about it. So first of all, you have to have good examples when you do some of this, soft, mushy type stuff, right? Second thing is you have to talk about it, okay? When you have classes in mathematics, okay, in histories and in so on and so forth, right? I would love that there is an ethic class in any of the, grade schools, right? Civic responsibilities, right? I mean, what's wrong with that? Because you really need to teach the kids, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that stuff, right? So, I would encourage examples. I would encourage, educating the kids both in schools and at home about the importance of, right and wrong, okay? Giving them critical thinking, developing critical thinking skills for them. Don't just listen to one size, one media, right? Have the open up the horizon to look at the other side. Have the empathy to know, well, I wonder what the other side thinks about that. Rather than I am so self-centered, everything is me, right? And that gets back to the zero-sum game, right? I mean, this is not a zero-sum game. I mean, do you really need a winner? So I think, there's not a easy answer like, why don't we just take this class, algebra or, geometry or chemistry, right? But I would encourage the teachers to really discuss and bring examples and talk about those kind of things besides scholastic excellence.
Now, that's a great point, that it needs to be integrated throughout the curriculum. So you need the math teacher, you need the science teacher, you need these people as well as those in the humanities and social sciences to be raising these kinds of questions.
And that's why I use the bamboo school as an example, because every student has to do community services. I mean, they have to go see the disadvantage. They have to, touch and feel those things, right? So they're really trying to develop citizens rather than just getting a good score on your test.
Now, that's an excellent example. In many school districts across North America, this kind of thing is required. Some sort of civic participation is a graduation requirement. It is here in Los Angeles and elsewhere. Now, one of the things that you raised was the question that, yes, China has billionaires. China's got this large and consuming middle class, but China also has some really poor people. Can you talk a little bit about what technology can do to help alleviate poverty? You brought it up, but maybe just go a little bit deeper.
Okay. So first of all, in order for the philanthropic sector to really prosper, okay, I said that you have to have an ecosystem, right? So technology alone is not going to lift all those people out of the poverty here, right? I mean, you have to have the personnel, for example, that I talk about. They will teach people, what philanthropy means and how to do that. But technology can also do a lot, because when you think about WeChat, okay, is one of the most powerful, social media platform in China. When they start a program and they said, I will match mobile donation. Remember, I told you the example, how easy it is using your wallet to do, to do this kind of matching donations. It really helps to multiply the donation quickly and easily, right? So when Alibaba said, hey, look, I'm going to start a program to worry about ecology. I'm going to help you plant a tree. And this is kind of how you, do the carbon footprint. And all of a sudden, people learn about the importance of carbon, in terms of the world, right? And there are many examples like that, okay? There is an individual that I run into that is really interested in agriculture. China is still fundamentally, agricultural-based country, right? So they're using technology to help people to plant, to water, to harvest, versus all by labor, because actually China is going to be a negative population growth pretty soon, right? So there are multiple examples of doing, stuff like that. But I would say in order to really greatly lift the people out of that, they really need the ecosystem. And this is where U.S. can really help them. And it's really not fighting, with each other on market shares on any of that stuff.
Francis, this has been wonderful. We've got a bunch of questions. People are asking things that we'll be addressing over the course of these 2 days, including negative side of technology in terms of its application in surveillance and these kinds of things. Other people are raising questions about digital currency and a whole lot more. But Francis, you've done exactly what you were asked to do. You have gotten us off to a fantastic start. Thank you so much for being with us here in today's workshop.